They set up the millionaire on a blind date with an obese girl, but his words left them in tears. Millionaire tech investor Lucas Grant was tired of being treated like a prize. His friends kept setting him up on shallow dates with women who cared more about his net worth than his heart. So when his childhood best friend insisted on arranging one final blind date, Lucas reluctantly agreed just to get it over with. Across town, Harper Wells, a plus-size kindergarten teacher with a warm smile, almost backed out. She wasn't used to expensive restaurants or blind dates with strangers. And when she overheard the waitress whisper, "He's a millionaire," her stomach dropped. What Harper didn't know was that the date had been set up as a joke by Lucas's own business partners. They assumed Lucas would be embarrassed. They thought he'd walk out. Instead, the moment Lucas walked in and saw her nervously adjusting her dress, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Harper stood up, ready to apologize. "I know I'm not what you expected," she whispered. Lucas pulled out her chair gently and sat beside her instead of across. "You're exactly what I needed," he said softly. The entire table of his business partners stopped laughing. Throughout dinner, Harper talked about her students, art, her dream of opening an inclusive daycare. Lucas found himself smiling more than he had in years. When the meal ended, Harper tried to excuse herself. "I know they dared you to come," she said quietly. "It's okay." Lucas stood, walked over to the men who set him up, and said something that made the restaurant freeze. "You tried to embarrass her, but all you did was expose how empty you are. She's the most beautiful person I've met in years, and I won't let anyone disrespect her." Then Lucas turned to Harper and offered his hand. "Harper, may I take you on a real date?" Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time in a long time, someone chose her, not out of pity, not out of embarrassment, but because she was worth choosing. Before we go deeper into this story, I want you to drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time is it. If you are new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Lucas Grant had built Tech Vision Capital from nothing into a venture capital firm managing over $2 billion in assets. At 34, he'd achieved every professional goal he'd set for himself. Forbes featured him annually in their 30 Under 30 and later 40 Under 40 lists. Business Insider called him the Tech Whisperer for his uncanny ability to identify promising startups before they became household names. His portfolio included early investments in companies that were now worth hundreds of millions. But professional success hadn't translated to personal fulfillment. Every relationship Lucas had attempted in the past 5 years had followed the same exhausting pattern. Women would be charming and attentive initially, but within weeks, the conversations would shift. Subtle mentions of expensive restaurants they'd always wanted to try, questions about his investment portfolio disguised as genuine interest in his work, suggestions about luxury vacations or designer shopping trips, hints about moving into his downtown penthouse apartment after just a handful of dates. Lucas had grown weary of being seen as a walking bank account rather than a human being with thoughts, feelings, and a desire for genuine connection. He'd started declining social invitations, spending evenings alone in his apartment that felt more like a showcase than a home, wondering if authentic relationships were even possible when you had the kind of wealth that made people calculate your net worth before asking your favorite color. His business partners Trevor Michaels, Jason Chen, and Marcus Donnelly had noticed Lucas's increasing isolation. Initially, their concern had been genuine. They'd known Lucas since their Harvard Business School days, had launched Tech Vision together, had built their success as a team. Seeing their friend and colleague withdraw from social engagement had worried them, but somewhere along the way, their concern had twisted into something darker. Trevor, in particular, had started making comments about Lucas being too picky and thinking he was better than everyone else. Jason had joked that Lucas needed to lower his standards if he ever wanted to find someone. And Marcus, always the instigator, had started plotting what he'd called Operation Reality Check. "We need to shake Lucas up," Marcus had said during drinks one evening when Lucas wasn't present. "He's gotten so isolated in his perfect little bubble. He needs to see that not everyone can meet his impossible standards." "What are you suggesting?" Trevor had asked, already intrigued. A setup, Marcus had replied with a grin that should have been a warning sign. We arrange a blind date. Find someone who's completely opposite of the women Lucas usually goes for. See how he reacts when he can't just write someone off for not being model perfect. That's cruel, Jason had said, though his tone suggested he was considering it rather than objecting. It's instructive, Marcus had countered. Lucas needs to learn that real people exist outside his narrow preferences. We'll be doing him a favor, really. Plus, it'll be hilarious watching him try to be polite. They'd planned it meticulously. Trevor had recruited Ryan Walsh, Lucas's childhood friend, who lived across the country and didn't know the business partners well to vouch for the setup, knowing Lucas trusted Ryan's judgment. They'd chosen Harper Wells specifically after Marcus had accidentally encountered her at a coffee shop and had decided she'd be perfect for their purposes, a plus-size woman who they assumed Lucas would find unattractive, someone they thought would highlight Lucas's supposed superficiality. They'd reserved a corner table at Millionaire with perfect sightlines to the main dining area. They'd planned to film Lucas's reaction on their phones, capture his discomfort or awkward attempts to end the date quickly, create content they could laugh about for years. They'd even placed bets on how quickly Lucas would make an excuse to leave. What they'd failed to understand was who Lucas actually was beneath the successful businessman exterior they thought they knew so well. Harper Wells had been teaching kindergarten for 6 years. She'd discovered her calling during college when she'd volunteered at an after-school program and had realized that working with young children brought her more joy than anything else she'd ever experienced. The way 5-year-olds saw the world with wonder and curiosity and brutal honesty had resonated with something deep in Harper's spirit. She loved watching children learn to read, seeing the moment when letters transformed from abstract symbols into meaningful words. She loved facilitating friendships between shy kids who needed gentle encouragement to connect with peers. She loved the absolute chaos of art time when finger paint ended up everywhere except the paper, and somehow that mess became part of the creative joy. She loved being present during the most formative years of human development, shaping not just academic skills, but social-emotional growth that would impact these children for the rest of their lives. What Harper didn't love was the constant judgment she faced simply for existing in a body society deemed unacceptable. She'd been plus-size since puberty, had endured every cruel comment and pitying look and unsolicited health advice from strangers who felt entitled to comment on her appearance. She'd tried every diet, every exercise program, every promise that losing weight would finally make her worthy of love and respect. Nothing had worked long-term, and eventually, Harper had made peace with her body, even as the world refused to do the same. Dating had been particularly brutal. Harper had created profiles on several apps over the years, always using recent, accurate photos, because she refused to catfish anyone or set herself up for the humiliation of showing up and watching someone's face fall when they realized she didn't match whatever airbrushed expectation they'd created. But her honesty had resulted in very few matches, and the dates that did happen usually ended with men making excuses within the first 15 minutes, or worse, staying through the date out of pity before never calling again. Harper had stopped trying about a year ago. She'd focused on her career, her friendships, her volunteer work with literacy programs. She'd convinced herself she was content with a life that didn't include romantic partnership. Some people weren't meant for that kind of love, she'd told herself, and there was nothing wrong with building a fulfilling life through other means. Then her best friend Keisha had insisted she give dating one more try. Just one more blind date, Keisha had pleaded. My cousin's friend knows someone who's supposedly perfect for you. Successful, kind, looking for genuine connection. What's the harm in trying one more time? Harper had resisted for weeks, but Keisha's persistence had eventually worn her down. Fine, Harper had agreed. One more date. But when this inevitably goes badly, I'm officially done with men, and you're never allowed to set me up again. Deal, Keisha had said, confident in a way that should have made Harper suspicious. The evening of the date, Harper had stared at herself in her bathroom mirror for 20 minutes, cycling through every negative thought pattern she'd developed over 28 years. The emerald green dress Keisha had insisted looked stunning suddenly seemed like a costume, like she was pretending to be someone who belonged in expensive restaurants with successful men. Who was she kidding? This was probably another setup for disappointment, another evening of watching someone's eyes travel up and down her body with barely concealed disappointment. She'd almost cancelled 3 times while getting ready, twice more in the Uber heading downtown, and once more standing outside La Mer, staring at the elegant restaurant entrance and feeling profoundly out of place. But Keisha had been so genuinely excited for her, and Harper couldn't bear to disappoint her friend. So she'd forced herself through the door, given her name to the hostess, whose eyes had briefly widened with surprise before professional training had smoothed her expression back to neutrality, and had followed to a table near the window with a view of the city lights she normally would have found beautiful if she weren't so consumed with anxiety. The waitress's whispered comment to her colleague, "That's the woman for table 12? The guy's a millionaire. This should be interesting," had confirmed Harper's worst fears. This was a joke, someone with money thinking it would be hilarious to set her up for public humiliation, to watch her hope for connection get crushed, to use her as entertainment for their cruel amusement. Harper had seriously considered leaving immediately, but pride had kept her in her seat. She wouldn't give whoever had orchestrated this setup the satisfaction of seeing her flee. She'd sit here, order something modest, eat with dignity, and then go home and tell Keisha that she'd tried, but this was definitively the last time. Then Lucas had walked in, and everything Harper had braced herself for had failed to materialize. He'd scanned the restaurant with the kind of casual confidence that came from belonging in expensive spaces. When his eyes had found her, Harper had braced for disappointment or confusion or the subtle recoil she'd learned to recognize. But instead, his expression had softened, not with pity, Harper knew pity when she saw it, but with something that looked almost like relief. Lucas had walked to the table with purposeful strides, and Harper had stood automatically, her rehearsed apology already forming, because she'd learned that, making it easy for men to reject her at least, preserved some dignity. "I know I'm not what you expected," she'd said quietly. "If you want to leave, I completely understand. No hard feelings." But Lucas hadn't left. He'd pulled out her chair with gentlemanly care, and then, in a move that had genuinely surprised Harper, he'd sat beside her instead of across the table. The choice had been deliberate, she'd realized. Sitting beside her rather than across created different energy. Less formal interview, more comfortable conversation between potential friends. "You're exactly what I needed," Lucas had said, and something in his tone had made Harper actually believe he might mean it. What neither of them had noticed initially was the corner table where 3 men sat with phones positioned for filming, expecting a very different evening than what was unfolding. The first hour of dinner had been unexpectedly comfortable. Lucas had asked about Harper's work with genuine interest, rather than polite obligation. She'd found herself sharing stories she genuinely loved the little boy, with severe anxiety, who'd been terrified of finger painting, until Harper had shown him that making messes was not just acceptable, but part of the creative joy. The girl with selective mutism, who'd finally spoken to Harper after 3 months of patient, pressure-free presence. The absolute beautiful chaos of teaching 5-year-olds how to navigate social interactions, manage big emotions, and discover the wonder of learning. "You clearly love what you do," Lucas had observed, leaning in attentively. "Your whole energy changes when you talk about your students. It's beautiful to witness someone so passionate about work that genuinely matters." "Most people don't think teaching kindergarten matters," Harper had admitted. "People act like it's glorified babysitting, but these are the most formative years of human development. The social-emotional skills kids learn at 5 impact them for life. If I can help a child develop self-confidence, emotional regulation, curiosity about learning, those are gifts they'll carry forever." "That's not babysitting," Lucas had agreed. "That's life-shaping work. Harper, what you're describing is more important than most of what I do, honestly. I move money around and bet on tech companies. You shape human beings during their most crucial developmental period. There's no comparison in terms of actual social value." The validation had been unexpected and deeply affecting. Harper had felt seen in a way she rarely experienced, especially not on dates. They'd talked about her dream of opening an inclusive daycare and preschool somewhere, serving families across economic levels, employing teachers with diverse backgrounds, creating curriculum representing many cultures and family structures, ensuring children with varying abilities felt genuinely welcomed and supported. "What would you call it?" Lucas had asked. "I've played with names like Growing Together or Every Child Learning Center," Harper had shared, surprised she was voicing this dream she'd barely admitted to close friends. "But the name matters less than the mission. I want to create space where every child feels valued and capable, regardless of their circumstances, abilities, or differences. Where parents aren't bankrupted by quality childcare. Where teachers are compensated fairly for genuinely important work." "That sounds incredible," Lucas had said with obvious sincerity. "What's preventing you from pursuing it?" "Reality mostly," Harper had replied with self-deprecating humor she'd perfected over years of explaining why dreams stayed dreams. "I have maybe 15,000 saved. Opening a licensed daycare requires probably 200,000 minimum for space rental, licensing, insurance, equipment, supplies, enough operating capital to survive the first year before enrollment stabilizes. Plus I'd need business expertise. I don't have marketing, financial management, regulatory navigation, staff hiring and training. It's a huge leap from teaching kindergarten to running an educational business." "Big dreams aren't problems," Lucas had said thoughtfully. "They're opportunities waiting for proper support and resources. Everything you're describing is solvable with right planning and capital." They'd continued talking for over 2 hours, the conversation flowing naturally from topic to topic. Lucas had shared his own journey building Tech Vision from a small angel investment fund to major venture capital firm, the failures before success, the loneliness that came with wealth nobody prepared you for, his frustration with relationships that felt transactional rather than authentic. "Everyone assumes having money solves all problems," Lucas had admitted, "but it creates different problems that are equally isolating. People see the wealth before they see you. Every relationship becomes transactional, whether consciously or not. Everyone wants something: access, opportunities, financial support, association with status. I got exhausted feeling like an investment opportunity rather than a human being with thoughts and feelings." "That sounds incredibly lonely," Harper had said with genuine sympathy. "I can't fully understand what that's like, but I understand feeling unseen in a different way. People see my body and make immediate assumptions: lazy, lacking discipline, not deserving romantic attention, probably unhealthy. They don't see the person inside this body who has dreams and intelligence and value beyond physical appearance. Their failure to see you accurately doesn't diminish your actual worth," Lucas had said with quiet intensity. "Harper, in these 2 hours, I've seen someone intelligent, compassionate, passionate about meaningful work, funny, insightful, deeply thoughtful about children's well-being. Anyone who can't recognize those qualities because they're fixated on appearance isn't worth your time or emotional energy." The connection Harper was feeling had seemed almost too good to be true. Lucas was handsome, successful, genuinely kind, asking questions that suggested real interest rather than polite endurance of the date. Part of Harper had kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the moment when Lucas would check his phone and make excuses about an early morning meeting or sudden emergency requiring his immediate departure. But that moment hadn't come. If anything, Lucas had seemed increasingly engaged as the evening progressed, ordering dessert to extend their time together, asking follow-up questions that built on things Harper had mentioned earlier in conversation, showing he'd been genuinely listening rather than just waiting for his turn to talk. Then movement from the corner table had shattered the comfortable bubble they'd created. 3 men had approached clearly intoxicated based on their unsteady movement and overly loud voices. The one in front, tall with the kind of aggressive confidence alcohol amplified, had addressed Lucas with familiarity that suggested close relationship. "Well, well," the man had said, his voice carrying across the quiet restaurant section. "Lucas Grant, the man who only dates runway models and complains that no woman meets his standards, slumming it with," he gestured dismissively at Harper, "someone from the regular people pool. Tell us, Lucas, Is this some kind of charity project? Or did you lose a bet, and this is your penance? The words had hit Harper like physical blows, her worst fears confirmed. This had been a setup, a joke, entertainment, at her expense. The evening that had felt so genuine suddenly revealed itself as elaborate cruelty. She'd started to stand, ready to leave with whatever dignity she could salvage, already calculating how quickly she could exit the restaurant and whether she'd make it to the Uber before tears started. But Lucas had stood faster. His hand had touched Harper's shoulder, gentle but firm, communicating she should stay before he'd turned to face the three men with an expression Harper had never seen another person wear. Cold, controlled fury, radiating from someone who knew exactly how powerful he was and was about to wield that power deliberately. "You set this up," Lucas had said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the suddenly silent restaurant. Other diners had stopped mid-conversation, sensing drama unfolding. "You thought it would be hilarious watching me be embarrassed by being seen with Harper. You chose her specifically thinking I'd react with disgust or discomfort that you could laugh about, probably film, definitely mock me about for years." "Come on, man, it was just a joke," one of the other men had said, suddenly less confident than his initial approach had suggested. "We were trying to shake things up for you. You've been so isolated, dating nobody, acting like you're above everyone. We thought this might humble you a bit." "No," Lucas had said, his voice hardening. "You were trying to humiliate both of us. Me, for supposedly having standards you could violate by forcing me into social discomfort, and Harper, for existing in a body you've deemed unworthy of romantic attention, for being someone you assumed I'd find repulsive. You turned a human being into a punchline for your entertainment. You weaponized someone's appearance as the basis for a cruel joke." The first man, Trevor, Harper would learn later, had opened his mouth to respond, but Lucas had continued, his voice growing stronger and more forceful. "Harper spent this evening sharing her life with me," Lucas had said, his words deliberate and clear. "She teaches kindergarten shapes lives during children's most formative years, does work that actually matters in the world. She has dreams of opening an inclusive daycare serving families across economic levels. She's thoughtful, funny, passionate about helping children develop confidence and curiosity. In 2 hours of conversation, she's shown more depth, authenticity, and genuine substance than any woman I've dated in the past 3 years of my life." Lucas had stepped closer to the three men, his posture protective of Harper, while simultaneously confrontational toward them. "And you three, you make money moving other people's money around. You don't create anything meaningful. You don't help anyone. You spend your time in restaurants like this, feeling superior to people who actually contribute valuable work to society. Harper does more genuinely important work in one day teaching kindergarten than you've accomplished in your entire careers combined." The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working, drawn to the doorway to witness this confrontation. Other diners were openly watching, phones out but respectfully not filming, clearly invested in how this would resolve. "She's the most beautiful person I've met in years," Lucas had continued, his voice softening slightly but remaining firm and clear. "Not despite her appearance, but because of who she is, completely someone genuine in a world drowning in performance. Someone who values helping children over accumulating wealth. Someone with meaningful dreams despite facing obstacles you three have never encountered in your privileged, protected lives. Someone brave enough to show up tonight even though she suspected this might be a setup for humiliation." He'd paused, letting his words sink in, giving the three men time to fully comprehend the situation they'd created. "You tried to use her as a prop in your cruel joke. You disrespected both of us, me by assuming I'm superficial enough to reject someone based on appearance, and Harper by treating her existence as inherently laughable. You exposed exactly how hollow you are, how little actual substance exists beneath your expensive suits and elite educations and professional success." "Lucas, man, we're your business partners," the third man had said, attempting to de-escalate with reminder of their professional relationship. "We've built Tech Vision together. We work together every day. This is just going to make everything awkward. Can't we just laugh this off and move on?" "No," Lucas had said decisively, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to making consequential decisions. We were business partners. Past tense. Consider this my formal notice that I'm dissolving our partnership. My lawyers will handle the detailed logistics, but effective immediately, I'm severing all professional relationships with the three of you. I don't work with people who lack basic human decency and moral character. You're ending a partnership worth tens of millions over a blind date gone wrong, Trevor had asked, genuine shock evident in his voice. I'm ending a partnership because you revealed yourselves to be people I don't want in my life professionally or personally, Lucas had corrected firmly. The monetary amount of our partnership is completely irrelevant. Character matters more than financial considerations. Harper understood that instinctively. You three apparently never learned it despite all your privilege, education, and professional success. That's a fundamental values gap I'm unwilling to bridge. Then Lucas had turned back to Harper, his expression transforming completely from cold anger to genuine warmth. He'd extended his hand to her with quiet grace. Harper, I apologize that my association with these men led to you being disrespected tonight. You deserved far better than being used as part of their cruel setup. Harper had taken his hand, still processing everything that had just happened, the public defense, the dissolved partnership, the clear prioritization of her dignity over professional relationships worth millions of dollars. You don't have to. I mean, you've already done more than enough. You defended me publicly. You dissolved a major business partnership. I don't expect anything more. Harper, Lucas had interrupted gently, his eyes holding hers with unmistakable sincerity. May I take you on a real date? Not this disaster orchestrated by men lacking integrity, but an actual date where we can continue getting to know each other without audience, agenda, or anyone's cruel joke influencing how we interact. Harper's eyes had filled with tears she'd been holding back throughout the entire confrontation. You actually want to see me again? After all this? Very much so, Lucas had confirmed without hesitation. If you're willing to give me a chance despite this terrible first impression and the association with people who treated you so badly. The terrible first impression came from them, not you, Harper had said, glancing at the three men who were being quietly but firmly escorted out by restaurant management who'd clearly been waiting for appropriate moment to intervene. You've been nothing but genuine and kind since the moment you sat down. So yes, absolutely. I'd love a real date with you, Lucas. Lucas had smiled then, a genuine, warm expression that transformed his entire face from serious businessman to someone much younger and more open. Tomorrow evening? Somewhere quieter and more casual than this? Maybe just a walk through the park and coffee somewhere we can talk without spectators or expensive restaurant formality. That sounds absolutely perfect, Harper had agreed, relief and hope flooding through her in equal measure. They'd left La Mer together, Lucas's hand gently at the small of Harper's back, protective without being possessive, supportive without being controlling. Outside in the cool evening air, Harper had finally allowed herself to fully process what had just happened. Thank you, she'd said, her voice thick with emotion. Not just for defending me, though that was incredible, but for seeing me, for sitting beside me instead of across from me, for treating me like someone genuinely worth your time rather than someone you had to politely endure. Harper, you are worth my time, Lucas had said seriously, stopping on the sidewalk to face her fully. This evening, despite the horrible setup and my former business partner's cruelty, has been the best date I've had in years. You're real. You're passionate about work that genuinely matters. You have dreams extending beyond just accumulating resources for yourself, and you're brave in ways most people never have to be. You walked into a situation where you expected judgment and possible humiliation, and you stayed anyway, with dignity intact. That takes strength most people don't possess. I almost left 3 separate times before you even arrived, Harper had admitted. When I heard the waitress mention you were a millionaire, I was convinced this was some elaborate joke at my expense. I've experienced enough cruelty around my body to recognize setups. It was a joke, Lucas had acknowledged, anger flashing briefly across his features. But the joke backfired spectacularly on them. They thought I'd be embarrassed or uncomfortable. Instead, I met someone I genuinely want to know better. Their cruelty accidentally created something they never intended, an actual connection between two people who might not have met otherwise. Harper had looked up at him, this successful, handsome man who'd just dissolved a partnership worth millions to defend her dignity. Why? Why defend me so strongly when you barely know me? Because how someone treats people they barely know reveals who they actually are at their core, Lucas had said. My former business partners showed their cruel and lacking empathy. You showed you're genuine, kind, and resilient, despite expecting judgment. And I showed hopefully that I care about character and human decency more than superficial judgments or maintaining comfortable professional relationships with people who lack integrity. Harper, I defended you because it was the right thing to do, but I asked you on a second date because I genuinely like you and want to know you better. Those are two separate but connected truths. They'd exchanged phone numbers, Lucas insisting on paying for Harper's Uber home despite her initial protests. You've already done so much, Harper had objected. I dissolved a business partnership that was going to end eventually anyway, Lucas had said with a slight smile. Trevor, Jason, and Marcus have been showing character problems for months. Tonight just crystallized something I'd been avoiding. Acknowledging. Letting you pay for your own ride home after what they put you through would be adding insult to injury. As Harper had ridden back to her modest apartment in East Atlanta, she'd replayed the entire evening repeatedly, hardly believing what had transpired. She'd gone expecting humiliation and had found someone who'd seen her value immediately. She'd prepared to be a punchline, and instead had been defended publicly by someone willing to sacrifice significant professional relationships to stand up for her dignity. For the first time in years, Harper had allowed herself genuine hope that maybe someone could see her completely body and heart and dreams and choose her not, despite those things, but because of them. The possibility felt terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. The next morning, Harper had woken to a text from Lucas. Good morning. I hope you slept well. Still planning on our walk this evening? I'm already looking forward to it. The message had made Harper smile, straightforward communication without games or manipulation, genuine expression of interest without trying to appear aloof or unavailable. She'd responded, Good morning. Slept great, despite processing everything that happened. Definitely still on for tonight. Should I meet you somewhere? Lucas had suggested Piedmont Park at 6 p.m., a public space where they could walk and talk without the formality of restaurant settings or the pressure of expensive venues. Harper had appreciated the choice somewhere casual and accessible, where the focus would be conversation rather than impressive displays of wealth. She'd spent the day teaching her kindergarten class, but her mind had kept drifting to the evening ahead. Her students had noticed her distracted energy. Miss Wells, you're smiling a lot today, 5-year-old Jasmine had observed with characteristic bluntness during circle time. Did something good happen? Something very good happened, Harper had confirmed, not elaborating but allowing herself to feel the joy without immediately qualifying or diminishing it. Her teaching assistant, Monica, had pulled Harper aside during lunch break. Okay, spill. You've been glowing all morning. What happened? Harper had shared the previous evening's events, the blind date setup, the cruel joke, Lucas's defense, the dissolved partnership, the plans for a second date. Monica had listened with increasingly wide eyes. Wait, he ended a business partnership worth millions to defend you, Monica had asked, clearly shocked. Harper, that's not normal. That's like something from a movie. I know, Harper had agreed, still processing it herself. Part of me keeps waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Lucas to text and say he'd reconsidered, for this to reveal itself as too good to be true. Or maybe, Monica had suggested gently, you found someone who actually values character over convenience. Not every good thing is secretly terrible, Harper. Sometimes people are genuinely kind. That evening, Harper had changed clothes 3 times before settling on casual jeans and a comfortable sweater, nothing fancy or performed, just her actual style. If Lucas was going to like her, it needed to be the real her, not some carefully curated version designed to seem more acceptable. She'd arrived at Piedmont Park 10 minutes early, nerves making her punctual to the point of being overeager. Lucas had arrived 5 minutes later, also dressed casually in jeans and a simple jacket, looking more relaxed than he had in his business attire the previous evening. "You look comfortable," Lucas had said by way of greeting, his tone suggesting this was a compliment. "I was worried you might feel pressure to dress up. I figured if we're going to actually get to know each other, it should be the real versions of ourselves," Harper had replied. "Performing who we think the other person wants gets exhausting quickly." "Exactly," Lucas had agreed with visible relief. "I spend so much time performing professionally, being the composed investor, the strategic thinker, the person who always has the right answer. It's nice to just be Lucas for a while." They'd started walking, the late spring evening perfect for outdoor activity, warm but not hot, slight breeze, the park alive with other people enjoying the weather, but not so crowded they couldn't have private conversation. "I have a confession," Lucas had said after a few minutes of comfortable silence. "I did some research on you last night. Nothing invasive, just your school's website. Some articles about your classroom's literacy program winning a district award 2 years ago. I hope that's not creepy." "I Googled you too," Harper had admitted with a laugh. "Found Forbes articles, TechVision's website, an interview you did about ethical investing. So we're equally creepy, I guess." "What did you think?" Lucas had asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "When you read about me?" Harper had considered her answer carefully. "I thought you seemed lonely despite all the success. The interview mentioned you rarely attend social events, that you've become increasingly private. The articles focused on your professional achievements, but barely mentioned personal life. It painted a picture of someone who'd built something impressive but isolated in the process." "That's remarkably accurate," Lucas had said, clearly surprised by her perceptiveness. "Most people read those articles and just see the success. They don't see the loneliness behind it." "I recognized it because I understand isolation in a different context," Harper had explained. "When people make assumptions about you based on something visible, wealth in your case, body size in mine, it creates this barrier where genuine connection becomes almost impossible. People approach with preconceptions that prevent them from seeing who you actually are." They'd walked in thoughtful silence for a while, both processing the vulnerability they'd just shared. Then Lucas had asked, "Tell me about your family. You've mentioned teaching and your dreams, but I don't know anything about where you came from." Harper had shared her background growing up in modest circumstances in a small Georgia town, parents who'd worked multiple jobs to provide for Harper and her 2 younger siblings. The way financial stress had created tension in her childhood home, but never diminished the love her parents had for their children. She'd talked about being the first in her family to finish college, the pride her parents had expressed despite not fully understanding what a degree in early childhood education would lead to. She'd mentioned her father's death from a heart attack 3 years ago, the grief that still felt raw sometimes, the way her mother had moved in with Harper's younger sister to help raise her new baby. "What about you?" Harper had asked. "What's your family situation?" Lucas had shared his own history, only child of 2 successful lawyers who'd had high expectations and limited emotional availability. He described growing up in privilege but also in isolation, parents who'd provided everything material but little warmth or genuine connection. He'd talked about their disappointment when he'd chosen business over law, their eventual pride in his success that still felt conditional on continued achievement, his relationship with them that was cordial but not close. "I don't think they'd understand what I did last night," Lucas had admitted. "Dissolving a lucrative partnership over ethical disagreement. They'd see it as financially irresponsible rather than morally necessary." "Do you regret it?" Harper had asked. "Not even slightly," Lucas had said with conviction. "I've been questioning whether I wanted to keep working with Trevor, Jason, and Marcus for months. They've been making increasingly questionable decisions, aggressive investment strategies that benefit us but hurt the startups we're supposed to support, dismissive attitudes toward entrepreneurs from non-traditional backgrounds, comments about women in tech that made me uncomfortable. Last night just crystallized something I'd been avoiding confronting." "What will you do now?" Harper had wondered. "Professionally, restructure TechVision as a solo operation, probably," Lucas had said thoughtfully. "Focus on ethical investing, companies working on genuine social good rather than just maximum profit. Maybe even create an investment fund, specifically supporting women and minorities in tech. I've always wanted to do that, but Trevor especially was resistant, said it was playing politics rather than just choosing best opportunities. They'd talked for 3 hours, walking through the park until it started getting dark, then relocating to a nearby coffee shop where they'd continued conversation until the staff began closing. The topics had ranged widely: favorite books, childhood memories, political views, thoughts on education reform, dreams about future impact beyond just their individual careers. "I should probably let you get home," Lucas had finally said reluctantly, as the barista began putting chairs on tables around them. "But I don't want this evening to end." "Me neither," Harper had admitted. "This has been the best date I've ever had, Lucas. Just talking, no performance, no pressure to be anything except ourselves. It's been perfect, honestly." "Can I see you again?" Lucas had asked. "Tomorrow? Is that too soon?" "Tomorrow's Sunday," Harper had noted. "I usually meal prep for the week and do laundry. Very exciting stuff. Could I help?" Lucas had offered. "I know that sounds weird, but I'd like to see your actual life, not just the curated date version, if you're comfortable with me in your space." Harper had felt vulnerability surge, letting Lucas see her modest apartment, her lived-in reality rather than carefully chosen public venues. But he'd asked for realness, and Harper had decided to trust that he'd meant it. "Okay, yeah, come over around noon. I'll make us lunch while we meal prep." "I'll bring groceries," Lucas had said, "and I make decent stir-fry if you're open to that as one of your prep meals for the week." The next day, Lucas had arrived at Harper's apartment with reusable bags full of groceries, vegetables, rice, chicken, ingredients for several healthy meals. Harper had been nervous about him seeing her space, a modest one-bedroom in a complex that was clean but clearly budget-conscious, furnished with second-hand finds and DIY projects rather than expensive designer pieces. But Lucas had walked in and immediately seemed to relax, as if Harper's authentic lived-in space felt more comfortable than formal restaurants or curated venues. "This is nice," he'd said genuinely. "It feels like you, warm and welcoming and real." They'd spent the afternoon cooking together, the small kitchen forcing them into close proximity that felt intimate without being uncomfortable. Lucas had proven to be a competent cook, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency, while Harper prepared rice and seasoned chicken. They'd talked while cooking, the casual domestic activity creating different dynamic than date settings, more natural, more like partners collaborating than performers trying to impress. "Where'd you learn to cook?" Harper had asked, watching Lucas handle the knife with clear skill. "Necessity," Lucas had admitted. "My parents employed household staff who prepared meals, but when I moved out for college and then my own place, I had to learn. I got tired of takeout and discovered I actually enjoy cooking. It's meditative, following recipes, creating something tangible, the immediate feedback of how food tastes. It's refreshingly straightforward, compared to business investments that take years to know if you chose correctly." By the end of the afternoon, Harper's refrigerator was stocked with portioned meals for the week. They'd prepared stir-fry, pasta with vegetables, chicken and rice bowls, simple, healthy options that would make Harper's busy teaching weeks more manageable. "Thank you," Harper had said as they'd cleaned the kitchen together. "This was incredibly thoughtful. I usually spend 3 hours meal prepping alone. Having help made it fun rather than just another chore." "Thank you for letting me into your actual life," Lucas had replied. "Harper, I meant what I said about wanting realness. This cooking together, seeing how you actually live, being part of your regular routines, this is what I want. Not fancy restaurants and performances, but actual life together." "Together," Harper had repeated, testing the word. "Is that what we're doing? We've had 2 dates, Lucas. Isn't it early to be thinking in terms of together?" "Maybe," Lucas had acknowledged, "but I know what I want. I've dated enough to recognize when something feels different, when someone feels right." "Harper, you feel right. If that's too much too soon, I'll back off. But I want you to know where I am emotionally." Harper had felt tears threatening, not from sadness but from the overwhelming relief of being seen and chosen and pursued by someone who actually seemed to value who she was. "It's not too much," she'd managed. "It's terrifying because I've been hurt so many times. But Lucas, You feel right to me too. So yes, let's see where this goes. Together. They'd kissed then, their first kiss, tentative and sweet, Harper's hands still damp from washing dishes and Lucas's hair smelling like the ginger from their stir-fry. It had been perfectly imperfect, and Harper had thought that maybe this was what genuine connection felt like, not polished or performed, but real and wonderful, precisely because of its authenticity. Over the following months, their relationship had deepened. Lucas had met Harper's mother and siblings during a family dinner that Harper had been nervous about, but which had gone surprisingly well. Her mother had liked Lucas's directness and obvious care for Harper. Her sister had appreciated that Lucas had spent an hour playing with her toddler without complaint. Her brother had grilled Lucas about his business and had come away impressed by Lucas's ethical investing approach. Harper had met Lucas's parents during a dinner at their Buckhead home, a more formal affair that had been as uncomfortable as Harper had anticipated. Lucas's mother had been politely cordial but clearly calculating Harper's background and appearance, likely finding both lacking. His father had asked pointed questions about Harper's education and career with tone, suggesting he found teaching kindergarten beneath his son's professional level. But Lucas had remained steadfastly supportive throughout, making clear through word and body language that Harper belonged there as his partner, regardless of his parents' subtle disapproval. On the drive back to Harper's apartment afterward, he'd apologized for their behavior. "You don't need to apologize for them," Harper had said, though she'd appreciated the gesture. "Lucas, I knew your parents wouldn't approve of me. I don't fit their vision of who you should be with. I'm plus size, working class background, elementary school teacher rather than someone with comparable wealth and status. That's okay. You're an adult. Their approval isn't required." "It's not okay that they were subtly demeaning," Lucas had said firmly. "Harper, you're brilliant at work that matters. You have dreams about creating inclusive educational spaces. You're kind and funny and genuine. Those qualities matter infinitely more than their superficial measures of worth based on appearance and social class." 6 months into their relationship, Lucas had asked Harper to move in with him. His downtown penthouse had seemed overwhelming initially, so much space for just 2 people, such obvious displays of wealth in the building's amenities and finishes. But Lucas had been open to making the space feel like theirs rather than just his, giving Harper full freedom to redecorate however she wanted, ensuring she had dedicated space for her work and hobbies. Harper had gradually made the penthouse feel more like home, adding plants and comfortable furniture, creating a reading nook with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, setting up a craft corner where she developed educational materials for her classroom. Lucas had supported all of it, seeming to genuinely appreciate how Harper's presence made the space warmer and more lived in. "This finally feels like home," Lucas had said one evening as they'd cooked dinner together in the kitchen that had once felt sterile, but now held their shared meals and conversation and laughter. "Before you, this place was just where I slept. Now it's actually where I live." 1 year into their relationship, on the anniversary of that first disastrous blind date at La Mer, Lucas had taken Harper back to the same restaurant, but this time by choice rather than setup. They'd requested the same table where they'd first met, and the staff who'd witnessed that original confrontation had been visibly pleased to see them returning together and clearly happy. Over dessert, Lucas had pulled out a small velvet box. "Harper, this past year has been the happiest of my life. You've shown me what genuine partnership looks like, supporting each other's dreams, being real with each other even when it's uncomfortable, building actual life together rather than just performing relationship. You make me want to be better, do more meaningful work, focus on what actually matters beyond just accumulating wealth." He'd opened the box to reveal a beautiful ring, elegant but not ostentatious, clearly chosen with thought for Harper's actual taste, rather than just maximum expense. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life being your partner in everything?" Harper had looked at the ring, then at Lucas, then back at the ring, emotions overwhelming her capacity for immediate words. Finally, yes, absolutely yes. "Lucas, this past year has shown me what I didn't believe was possible, someone who sees all of me and chooses me, not despite who I am, but because of it. Yes, I'll marry you." The restaurant staff had erupted in applause. They'd been watching, hopefully, clearly invested in the couple whose relationship had begun so dramatically in their space. The manager had sent over champagne on the house, saying, "We've been hoping you two would come back." It's not often we witness love that starts with someone dissolving a business partnership to defend someone's dignity. They'd married 6 months later in a small ceremony at Piedmont Park, the same place where they'd had their second date, where they'd first really started knowing each other beyond the dramatic circumstances of their blind date. Harper had worn a dress she'd chosen for comfort and personal style rather than traditional bridal expectations. Lucas had worn a suit he'd picked because Harper had mentioned she liked him in blue. The ceremony had been officiated by Ryan, Lucas's childhood friend, who'd inadvertently connected them through the blind date setup. "I had no idea when I vouched for that date that Trevor and the others were setting up a cruel joke," Ryan had said in his opening remarks. "But I'm grateful my name was used to get Lucas there, because witnessing their love has restored my faith in genuine human connection. These two people found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful." In his vows, Lucas had said, "Harper, 1 year ago I walked into a restaurant expecting another disappointing date. Instead, I found someone who saw past my wealth to the person underneath, someone genuine in a world full of performance, someone who challenged me to focus on meaningful work rather than just accumulating resources. You've made me better in every possible way. I promise to keep seeing all of you, your brilliance, your kindness, your dreams, your complete self. I promise to support your vision of inclusive education. I promise to keep choosing you every single day for the rest of my life." In her vows, Harper had said, "Lucas, I walked into that restaurant expecting humiliation. I'd been taught by years of experience that people who looked like you didn't choose people who looked like me. But you sat beside me instead of across from me. You saw my dreams as valuable. You defended my dignity publicly when you could have just made polite excuses and left. You showed me that genuine love isn't about meeting superficial standards, but about seeing each other's full humanity. I promise to keep supporting your evolution toward more meaningful work. I promise to challenge you when you're wrong and celebrate you when you're right. I promise to build the life we both want together." After the ceremony, during the small reception at a restaurant Harper had chosen, Lucas had made an announcement. "Harper and I are launching a foundation focused on inclusive early childhood education. We'll be providing grants to educators, developing programs, serving diverse populations, funding scholarships for teachers from underrepresented backgrounds, and eventually opening demonstration schools showing what truly inclusive education looks like." He'd looked at Harper with obvious love and pride. "My brilliant wife has been developing this vision for years. Now we have the resources to actually make it happen. Harper will direct the Foundation's educational programming while continuing to teach part-time. This is her dream, and I'm honored to help make it reality." Harper had felt tears streaming down her face, not just from Lucas's support, but from the realization that her dream of inclusive education was actually going to happen, that the vision she'd barely dared voice to close friends was becoming real through partnership with someone who genuinely valued her expertise and passion. 2 years into their marriage, the Foundation had funded programs in 15 schools, provided scholarships for 30 teachers pursuing early childhood education degrees, and was finalizing plans for their first demonstration school, Growing Together Learning Center, that would open the following year with Harper as executive director while maintaining her part-time classroom teaching. "You're going to burn out," Lucas had cautioned gently one evening when Harper had been working until midnight on curriculum development. "Running a foundation, directing a new school, still teaching 2 days a week, that's 3 full-time jobs, Harper." "I know," Harper had acknowledged, "but this is my dream finally happening. I don't want to miss any of it by delegating too much." "What if we hire an associate director for the school?" Lucas had suggested. "Someone to handle daily operations while you focus on educational vision and curriculum. You'd still be in charge, but you wouldn't have to manage every single detail personally." Harper had recognized the wisdom in this compromise. They'd hired an experienced administrator who'd shared Harper's vision, and suddenly the work had become sustainable rather than overwhelming. 3 years into their marriage, Growing Together opened its doors with 60 enrolled students across preschool and kindergarten, staff representing diverse backgrounds, families from across economic spectrum thanks to sliding scale tuition, and curriculum explicitly incorporating multiple cultures, family structures, and learning approaches. The opening day had been everything Harper had dreamed. Children of different abilities, learning side by side, parents from vastly different circumstances, connecting over shared experiences of raising young children, teachers excited about implementing truly inclusive practices. "You did this," Lucas had said, watching Harper greet families during the opening celebration. "This was your vision, your expertise, your relentless commitment to believing every child deserves quality education regardless of circumstances. I just provided funding, Harper. You created this." "We created this together," Harper had corrected. "Your support made it possible. Your willingness to invest in education that won't generate financial returns but will generate social impact. That partnership is what allowed this to exist." 5 years into their marriage, Growing Together had expanded to serve 200 children, with waiting lists for every grade level. The foundation had grown to fund programs in 40 schools across the Southeast. Harper had written a book about inclusive early childhood education that had become required reading in teacher preparation programs. And Lucas had fully restructured his investment firm to focus exclusively on companies working on social good, education, healthcare access, environmental sustainability, economic equity. "Remember that blind date?" Harper had asked one evening as they'd walked through Piedmont Park, now a regular tradition for them. "When Trevor and Jason and Marcus thought it would be hilarious to set you up with someone they assumed you'd find repulsive. Best setup of my life," Lucas had said without hesitation. Their cruelty accidentally created something they never intended. They thought they were humiliating us both. Instead, they introduced me to my future wife and partner in building meaningful work. "Do you ever wonder what happened to them?" Harper had asked. "Your former business partners?" "Not really," Lucas had admitted. "I heard through professional circles that their firm imploded about a year after I left too many aggressive bets. Too much focus on short-term profit over sustainable growth. But honestly, Harper, I don't spare them much thought. They revealed who they were. I removed them from my life, and I moved forward. That night was about meeting you, not about them." Harper had smiled, squeezing Lucas's hand. "I'm grateful for that terrible joke. Without it, we might never have met. Two lonely people, you isolated by wealth, me isolated by society's judgment, who found each other because someone thought our pairing would be absurdly funny. Turns out the joke was on them. We built something real from their cruelty. The best revenge is living well," Lucas had said. "And Harper, we're living incredibly well. Not because of wealth, though that helps, but because we found genuine partnership. We see each other completely. We support each other's dreams. We've built meaningful work together. That's the life they'll never have because they lack the character to build it." They'd walked in comfortable silence, both grateful for the unexpected journey from that disastrous blind date to this beautiful life they'd created together. 10 years after that transformative blind date at La Mer, Harper and Lucas stood together at the grand opening of their 5th Growing Together Learning Center, this one in a neighborhood that had never had access to quality early childhood education. The facility was state-of-the-art, but warm, designed to feel welcoming rather than institutional, with bright colors and child-sized furniture and outdoor play spaces that prioritized both safety and adventurous exploration. "Remember when this was just a dream you were afraid to voice out loud?" Lucas asked Harper as they watched families tour the new building, children excitedly exploring classrooms that would become their learning environments. "I remember thinking it was impossible," Harper admitted. "That someone like me, a kindergarten teacher with minimal savings and no business experience, couldn't possibly create something like this. And now we have 5 centers serving over 400 children, with 2 more opening next year." "You created this," Lucas said firmly. "I provided funding, but Harper, this is your vision, your expertise, your relentless commitment to believing every child deserves quality education. Don't diminish your role by crediting me." "We created this together," Harper corrected gently. Partnership means acknowledging what each person brings. You brought resources and business acumen. I brought educational expertise and vision. Together we made something neither of us could have built alone. That evening, after the opening celebration had ended and they'd returned to their home, they'd moved from Lucas's downtown penthouse to a house in a neighborhood with excellent public schools and diverse demographics, wanting to be part of a real community rather than isolated in luxury. They'd had a conversation that had been building for months. "I want to talk about expanding our family," Harper had said as they'd prepared dinner together, a routine that had remained constant throughout their relationship. Not just the metaphorical family of the schools and foundation, but our actual family. "Lucas, I want us to consider adoption." Lucas had stopped chopping vegetables, giving Harper his full attention. "Tell me what you're thinking." "We've been married 5 years, Harper had explained. "We're financially stable. We have a home with extra bedrooms. We've built our lives around serving children and families. And Lucas, there are so many kids in the foster system who need families. Older kids, sibling groups, children with special needs, kids who often get overlooked because people want to adopt infants. I keep thinking about how we could provide a home for children who need one." "I love this idea," Lucas had said immediately. "Harper, I've been thinking along similar lines but wasn't sure how to raise it." "Yes, absolutely. Let's pursue adoption." "What age range are you thinking?" They'd started the process the following month, working with an agency specializing in placing older children and sibling groups. After months of home studies, training sessions, and interviews, they'd been matched with 2 siblings, 10-year-old Aisha and her 8-year-old brother Marcus, children who'd been in foster care for 3 years after their single mother had died in a car accident, and no extended family had been willing or able to take them both. The first meeting had been at the agency, carefully supervised and structured to minimize pressure on the children who'd experienced enough disappointment from adults making promises they didn't keep. Aisha had been guarded, clearly protecting herself and her younger brother from potential hurt. Marcus had been more open but watchful, following his sister's lead on whether these potential parents could be trusted. "Hi Aisha, hi Marcus," Harper had said, keeping her voice warm but not overwhelming. "I'm Harper, and this is Lucas. We've been hoping to meet you both. Your caseworker told us you love reading, Aisha, and that you're really good at math, Marcus. Those are both subjects I taught when I was a kindergarten teacher." "You're a teacher?" Aisha had asked, slight interest breaking through her guarded expression. "Was a teacher," Harper had clarified. "Now I run schools, places where other teachers work with kids, but I still miss being in the classroom sometimes. What kinds of books do you like reading?" The conversation had proceeded carefully from there, Aisha gradually lowering her defenses as Harper had demonstrated genuine knowledge about children's literature and had asked Marcus thoughtful questions about math that showed she respected his intelligence rather than talking down to him. Lucas had been quieter initially, understanding that Harper's teaching experience gave her better instincts for connecting with children. But when Marcus had mentioned loving basketball, Lucas had found his opening. "I'm terrible at actually playing basketball," Lucas had admitted, "but I love watching games. What team do you follow?" The placement had happened 3 months later, after multiple visits and overnight stays that had allowed everyone to assess whether this potential family could actually work. The first weeks had been challenging Aisha, testing boundaries constantly to see if Harper and Lucas would give up on them like previous placements had. Marcus experiencing nightmares about his mother's death that required patient comfort in the middle of the night. But Harper and Lucas had remained consistent, providing exactly what they'd promised. A stable home, clear expectations paired with genuine affection, space for the children to grieve their losses while building new attachments. 6 months into the placement, during a family meeting to discuss how things were going, Aisha had asked the question both children had clearly been thinking about for weeks. "Are you going to keep us? Like, actually adopt us forever? Or is this temporary until you get tired of us?" "We want to adopt you," Lucas had said firmly. "Both of you, permanently, forever. Aisha and Marcus, you're not temporary, you're family. But we need to know if that's what you want too. Adoption is a choice everyone makes, including you." "What if we're bad sometimes?" Marcus had asked, his 8-year-old logic trying to understand the conditions of belonging. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes, Harper had explained. Lucas and I will make mistakes as your parents. You'll make mistakes as kids. That's part of being human and being family. Making mistakes doesn't mean you stop being family. We work through problems together, we apologize when we mess up, and we keep showing up for each other. That's what family means. The adoption had been finalized 1 year after that first blind date anniversary celebration at La Mer. Standing in family court with Aisha and Marcus, legally becoming their parents, had felt as significant as Harper and Lucas's wedding, another moment of choosing family, of building connections based on commitment rather than just biology. "You're officially Aisha and Marcus Grant now," the judge had said warmly. "Congratulations to this family." "Can we still remember our first mom?" Aisha had asked quietly, the question clearly weighing on her despite months of therapy and reassurance. "Always," Harper had said immediately. "She's part of your story, part of who you are. Lucas and I aren't replacing her. We're adding to your family, giving you a home and parents now while honoring the mother who loved you first. Both things can be true. You can love her memory and love us too." 15 years after that transformative blind date, the Grant family had grown and evolved in ways Harper and Lucas could never have predicted that evening at La Mer. Aisha was now 18 and starting college, planning to study social work, with dreams of helping other foster children navigate the system. Marcus was 16, excelling at both basketball and mathematics, considering engineering programs. And 3 years earlier, Harper and Lucas had adopted again, this time a sibling group of 3 younger children whose parents had lost custody due to substance abuse issues. Their home was chaotic and loud and filled with the beautiful mess of raising 5 children with complex histories and diverse needs. Harper had stepped back from daily management of growing together to focus more on family, though she remained chair of the Educational Foundation's board. Lucas had fully transitioned his investment firm to focus exclusively on social impact, measuring success by positive change rather than just financial returns. "Do you ever miss it?" Harper had asked one evening, after the younger children were finally asleep and they'd stolen a rare moment of quiet on their back porch. "The life you had before that blind date? The penthouse apartment? The business focused on maximum profit? The freedom to make decisions without considering 5 children's needs?" "Never," Lucas had said without hesitation. "Harper, that life was empty. I had wealth but not purpose, success but not meaning. That blind date, as terrible as the setup was, gave me everything that actually matters. You, our children, work focused on genuine impact rather than just accumulation. I wouldn't trade any of this for that old life." "Even the chaos?" Harper had teased. 3 teenagers and 2 elementary-aged kids, creating constant noise and mess? "Especially the chaos," Lucas had confirmed. "This is what life is supposed to be. Not sterile perfection, but beautiful, messy reality." 20 years after that blind date, Harper and Lucas received an unexpected email from someone they'd almost forgotten. Trevor Michaels, one of Lucas's former business partners, who'd orchestrated the cruel setup. The email had been long, clearly written and rewritten multiple times. "Lucas and Harper, I know I have no right to contact you after what I did 20 years ago. The blind date setup, the cruel joke, using Harper as a punchline for our entertainment. It was unconscionable. I've spent the past 2 decades building my life and my business, and I thought I'd moved past who I was then. But recently my teenage daughter came out to me as gay, and some of her classmates have been bullying her, making her the target of cruel jokes. Watching her experience that treatment made me realize I was those bullies 20 years ago. I was the person who thought someone else's humanity was acceptable entertainment. I treated Harper as less than human, someone whose feelings didn't matter because she didn't meet superficial appearance standards. And I tried to humiliate you, Lucas, for supposedly having standards I could violate. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but I wanted you both to know that I recognize how wrong I was, that I'm genuinely sorry for the pain I caused, and that your relationship, the family you've built, the work you've done through the foundation, all of it stands as evidence that goodness can come from terrible circumstances if people choose compassion over cruelty. My daughter knows this story. I told her about what I did as a cautionary tale when she asked me about dealing with her bullies. I wanted her to understand that people who are cruel are often deeply insecure, that their cruelty reveals their own emptiness rather than anything about their targets. I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that you changed my life by how you responded to my cruelty. You showed my daughter and me what genuine character looks like. Trevor. Harper had read the email multiple times, processing complex emotions. The hurt from 20 years ago was still there, accessible despite time and healing. But so was recognition that people could grow and change, that acknowledging harm was meaningful, even if it couldn't undo the original pain. "What do you want to do?" Lucas had asked, reading over her shoulder. "I think I want to respond," Harper had said slowly. "Not to absolve him. What he did was genuinely cruel and caused real pain, but to acknowledge that he's apparently become someone different, someone capable of recognizing harm and learning from it." They'd crafted a response together. "Trevor, thank you for your email and your honesty about what happened 20 years ago. You're right that the setup was cruel and caused genuine pain. But we're also grateful that your cruelty accidentally led to us meeting. Our relationship, our family, and our work have brought us both profound joy and purpose. We hope your daughter knows she's loved exactly as she is. Our family includes LGBTQ+ members, and we've worked hard to create spaces at home and in our schools where all identities are celebrated. If she ever needs support from adults who understand her experience, please feel free to share our contact information with her. People can change. The fact that you recognized your past cruelty and chose to share that recognition with your daughter shows growth. We hope you continue that growth and use your business success to create positive impact rather than just accumulating wealth. We wish you and your family well. Harper and Lucas. The exchange had felt like closure on a chapter that had defined the beginning of their relationship. That blind date had started with cruelty, but had become the foundation for genuine love, meaningful work, and a family built on choice and commitment. 25 years after that blind date, Harper and Lucas sat together at a celebration honoring their foundation's impact. Growing Together now operated 15 learning centers across the Southeast, serving over 1,000 children. The foundation had funded early childhood education programs in 200 schools, provided scholarships for 500 teachers, and had become a recognized leader in inclusive education practices. "We want to share something personal," Harper had said during her speech at the celebration. "Our relationship began with a cruel joke. Lucas's business partners set up a blind date, choosing me specifically because they assumed Lucas would be embarrassed or disgusted by being seen with someone who looked like me. They wanted to film his discomfort, create content they could mock, highlight his supposed superficiality. The audience had been silent, clearly surprised by this revelation about the foundation's beloved founders. But Lucas didn't react the way they expected," Harper had continued. "He sat beside me instead of across from me. He asked about my dreams. He defended my dignity publicly and dissolved a business partnership worth millions rather than allow their disrespect to stand. He saw me, all of me, and chose me, not despite who I was, but because of it." She'd paused, looking at Lucas with obvious love. "That night taught us that how you respond to cruelty matters more than the cruelty itself. That genuine character reveals itself in moments of pressure. That love can grow in the most unlikely circumstances if people choose compassion over judgment. And that the best relationships are built on seeing each other's full humanity rather than just surfaces. Our foundation exists because of lessons learned that night," Lucas had added, standing to join Harper. "We learned that everyone deserves dignity regardless of their appearance, background, or circumstances. That children need adults who see their potential rather than just their challenges. That building meaningful lives requires focusing on impact rather than just accumulation. Everything we've created traces back to that blind date, both the cruelty that started it and the love that grew from it." 30 years after that blind date, Harper and Lucas celebrated the milestone privately at Piedmont Park, the place where they'd had their second date, where they'd really begun knowing each other beyond the drama of that first evening. Their children were adults now. Aisha, a social worker helping foster children, Marcus, an engineer designing accessible technology, their 3 younger adopted children pursuing their own dreams in education, art, and environmental science. 30 years, Harper marveled, leaning against Lucas as they walked familiar paths. 3 decades since, you sat beside me at that restaurant and said I was exactly what you needed. You were, Lucas confirmed. You still are. Harper, you've shown me what genuine partnership looks like, supporting each other's growth, building meaningful work together, creating family that extends beyond just us. Everything good in my life traces back to you. Everything good in my life traces back to you seeing me, Harper replied. Lucas, I'd spent years believing people who looked like you didn't choose people who looked like me. That love and partnership required meeting narrow standards I'd never meet. You showed me that genuine connection transcends superficial judgments. You chose me when you could have walked away, and that choice changed everything. They'd walked in comfortable silence, both reflecting on 3 decades of partnership. From that disastrous blind date to this beautiful life, children raised, schools built, countless families served. A relationship deepened through thousands of daily choices to keep showing up for each other. The best revenge against Trevor and the others, Lucas had said thoughtfully, was building a life they couldn't understand or appreciate. They thought appearance and wealth were all that mattered. We built something real, genuine love, meaningful work, family created through choice and commitment. They were wrong about everything that actually matters, and our life proves it. I hope they found their own growth, Harper had said generously. But mostly I'm just grateful. That cruel joke became the foundation for everything wonderful in our lives. Sometimes the worst moments contain seeds of the best futures, if we're brave enough to nurture them. 35 years after that blind date, Harper passed away peacefully at 73 after a brief illness. She'd lived to see all 5 of her children established in meaningful careers, had known 12 grandchildren, had witnessed growing together expand nationally with locations in 15 states. She'd spent her final months surrounded by family, still sharp-minded and engaged with the foundation's work until the very end. At her funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives she'd touched, former students now adults with children of their own, teachers whose careers she'd supported, families who'd accessed quality education through programs she'd championed, community members who'd known her as more than just an education advocate, but as someone who genuinely cared about making the world better. Lucas, now 79, gave the eulogy with voice steady, despite obvious grief. 35 years ago, my former business partners set up a cruel joke. They arranged a blind date, choosing Harper specifically because they assumed I'd be embarrassed by her appearance. They thought it would be hilarious watching me react with discomfort to someone who didn't meet conventional beauty standards. They wanted to highlight my supposed superficiality and create content they could mock. He'd paused, looking at the overflow crowd filling every seat and standing along the walls. What those men failed to understand, what I barely understood at the time, was that Harper was extraordinary, not despite her appearance but completely independently of it. Her appearance was simply the body that housed a remarkable mind, compassionate heart, and relentless commitment to helping children and families access opportunities they deserved. That first night, Harper shared her dream of opening an inclusive daycare. Lucas had continued. She had $15,000 saved and a vision worth millions. She wanted to create spaces where every child felt valued, regardless of their circumstances, where families weren't bankrupted by quality care, where teachers were compensated fairly for genuinely important work. I had resources to help make that vision reality. Together, we built something neither of us could have created alone. Harper showed me what genuine love looks like, Lucas had said, his voice cracking with emotion. Not transactional relationships based on wealth and status, but partnership built on shared values and daily choices to keep showing up for each other. She showed me what meaningful work looks like, not just accumulating wealth, but using resources to create genuine positive impact. She showed me what family looks like, not just biological connections, but commitments we choose and honor. He gestured to their 5 adult children sitting in the front row. She showed me that family can be built from the most unlikely beginnings. We adopted children others overlooked, older kids, sibling groups, children with complex histories. Harper loved them fiercely and patiently, giving them the stability and affection they'd been denied, showing them they were worth choosing. Harper's legacy isn't the 15 schools bearing her name or the foundation serving tens of thousands of children, Lucas had concluded. Her legacy is teaching everyone she encountered that people deserve dignity regardless of appearance, circumstances, or background. That genuine character matters more than superficial measures of worth. That love and family can grow from the most unlikely seeds if we're brave enough to nurture them with patience and commitment. That cruel blind date setup was meant to humiliate us both, Lucas had said. Instead, it became the foundation for 35 years of genuine partnership, meaningful work, and a family built on choice and love. Harper transformed cruelty into compassion, turned a joke into a blueprint for building something beautiful. That was her gift, seeing possibility where others saw limitations, finding hope where others saw only pain. I loved her completely. Lucas had finished, tears flowing freely now. I'll carry her with me for whatever time I have remaining, and I'll keep honoring her by continuing the work we built together, ensuring every child has access to quality education, supporting families facing obstacles, using resources to create genuine positive change. That's how I keep her alive, by living the values she embodied every single day of her remarkable life. Lucas lived 7 more years after Harper's death, spending that time ensuring the foundation continued with Harper's values guiding every decision. He'd established endowments guaranteeing permanent funding for Growing Together schools and scholarship programs. He'd written extensively about their relationship and the lessons it had taught about looking beyond superficial judgments to see people's genuine character. When Lucas passed at 86, his funeral drew crowds similar to Harper's employees from his investment firm that had pioneered social impact investing, families served by the foundation, community members who'd known him as more than just a wealthy businessman. Aisha, now 53 and director of the foundation Harper and Lucas had built, gave his eulogy. Most people know Lucas Grant's public story: successful venture capitalist, social impact pioneer, education philanthropist. Aisha had begun. But I knew him as Dad, the man who chose to adopt me and my brother Marcus when we were older, foster children others had overlooked, who learned to braid my hair even though he'd never had daughters before, who showed up to every school event, every important moment, consistently choosing to be present rather than just providing resources. Dad's transformation began with a cruel joke, Aisha had explained, sharing the blind date story for those who didn't know it. His business partners set him up with Harper, expecting humiliation. Instead, Dad recognized something they couldn't see, that Harper was extraordinary. He chose compassion over cruelty, genuine connection over superficial judgment, meaningful partnership over comfortable isolation. That choice changed thousands of lives, Aisha had continued. Because Dad and Harper built a relationship based on shared values and mutual respect, they were able to create Growing Together schools, serving tens of thousands of children. Because they modeled what genuine love looks like, they inspired countless couples to build their own relationships on character rather than surfaces. Because they chose to adopt children others overlooked, my siblings and I have had opportunities we would never have accessed otherwise. Dad taught me that family is built through daily choices, not just biology, Aisha had concluded. That wealth matters most when it's used to help others. That responding to cruelty with compassion creates more lasting impact than responding with more cruelty. That the best legacy isn't what you accumulate, but who you help and how you love. A blind date, meant as a joke, became a foundation for genuine love and meaningful impact. Aisha had finished. That's Dad's legacy, transforming cruelty into compassion, turning limitation into possibility, building something beautiful from unpromising beginnings. He showed all of us what's possible when we choose to see people's genuine character rather than just surfaces. 40 years after that blind date at Millionaire, the Grant family gathered at the restaurant that still stood and still remembered the dramatic night when Lucas had dissolved a business partnership to defend Harper's dignity. The restaurant had embraced its role in their story, keeping the corner table where they'd first sat marked with a small plaque, where Harper and Lucas Grant began their journey from cruel joke to genuine love. The family had grown to include grandchildren and great-grandchildren now, multiple generations built from that single evening of choosing compassion over cruelty. They'd gathered to share the story one more time, ensuring younger generations understood the foundation their family was built on. "Tell us about the night Grandma and Grandpa met," one great-grandchild had requested. And so they told the story again, how cruel business partners had set up a blind date as a joke, choosing Harper because they thought Lucas would be embarrassed by her appearance. How Lucas had sat beside her instead of across from her, recognizing her worth immediately. How he'd defended her dignity publicly and dissolved a partnership worth millions rather than allowing disrespect to stand. How they'd built genuine love from that unlikely beginning, creating family and meaningful work that had touched thousands of lives. "The lesson isn't that cruel jokes lead to happy endings," Aisha had explained to the younger generation. "The lesson is that how we respond to cruelty matters more than the cruelty itself." Grandma and Grandpa chose compassion, genuine connection, and commitment to seeing each other's full humanity. Those choices transformed a terrible moment into a foundation for everything beautiful in our family. They showed us that family can be built from any beginning if people are brave enough to choose each other consistently, Marcus had added. That love transcends superficial judgments. That meaningful lives are built through daily choices to show up for each other rather than grand gestures. That's their real legacy, not the schools or foundation, but the values they lived and passed to all of us. The family had raised glasses in toast to Harper and Lucas, two people who'd met through cruelty but had built genuine love, who'd started as a millionaire and a kindergarten teacher, but had become partners creating genuine social impact, who'd shown everyone around them that the best relationships are built on seeing each other's genuine character rather than just surfaces. From a blind date meant as a cruel joke had come 35 years of genuine partnership, 5 adopted children, 12 grandchildren, 7 great-grandchildren, 15 schools serving thousands of children, a foundation changing how America thought about early childhood education, and proof that sometimes the worst moments contain seeds of the best futures if we're brave enough to nurture them with patience, compassion, and consistent commitment. The Grant family legacy wasn't wealth or status, it was the values Harper and Lucas had lived. That every person deserves dignity, regardless of appearance or circumstances, that genuine character matters more than superficial measures, that family is built through choice and commitment rather than just biology, and that responding to cruelty with compassion creates lasting change. And it all started because one woman was brave enough to show up to a blind date despite expecting humiliation, and one man was wise enough to recognize her extraordinary character immediately, sitting beside her instead of across from her, and saying words that changed both their lives. "You're exactly what I needed."